Welcome to the Friday edition of Juan's World, and once again I'm going to talk about change. Last time I talked about change in your social environment and what you do about it, and today I'm going to talk about personal change, things that you want to change, things that are difficult to change. And I'm not going to talk about all the enormous possibilities for change. And I'm certainly not going to talk about the things that are relatively easy to change. You decide, for example, that you don't like where you're doing your banking, and so you want to change to another bank. I mean, it might be a little bit complicated, but it's not all that complicated. And it doesn't take that much. And it certainly doesn't take a great deal of emotional energy. What I want to talk about are changes that I'm going to put under the broad heading of addictions. But I'm not just going to talk about the typical addictions, alcohol, nicotine, cocaine, what have you. I'm going to talk about any habit that you have that you derive some pleasure from, but you also get pain from in some way, and you want to quit, but you can't, or it's not easy. And I'm going to use the umbrella addiction, but it could be shopping, it could be working too much. You know, we talk about people being shopaholics or workaholics, or there could be a gambling addiction. I'm going to put a lot of things under that rubric, and of course I'm going to be simplistic, but I want to make one clear point about how it is that we go about making change in our lives. So let's get started. Now, the first point I want to make mostly concerns addiction to physical substances, but it's not entirely true, but that's where it comes from. The addiction to something like nicotine or alcohol or heroin has two components that we can separate out. They may not actually be completely separable, but we can analytically separate them out. I'm going to call them the physical addiction and the psychological addiction. And the thing is that if you do not address both sides of the addiction, you're not going to change. And there are many, 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 many examples of programs that recognize this. Like, for example, Alcoholics Anonymous. Alcoholics Anonymous has 12 steps. And those 12 steps don't actually involve the step quitting drinking, which is, I mean, it's interesting to me. The assumption is that you have already quit drinking. And so the question in AA's mind is not how do you quit drinking, it's how do you stay sober? How do you not drink again? And so they have, in a way, put the physical part aside, which I think is actually not a terribly good idea. But they're saying, okay, we've got the physical part taken care of. Maybe, for example, you haven't had a drink for some reason or other. Maybe you've been in a hospital or for some reason that you haven't had a drink, so that your body is not physically addicted to alcohol, but you're still psychologically addicted. And so most of the 12 steps have to do with asking this question, and it's the key question. Why was I drinking in the first place? One answer is, well, it makes me happy. But that's only a superficial answer. And people who have problems with drinking are not drinking because it makes them happy or simply makes them happy. It does something else. So question number one is, why are you doing what it is that you're doing that you want to quit? Which then leads to the question, why do you want to quit? And that is where I'm going to elaborate most specifically. But I want to really start, though, with the physical side. There were things like nicotine or alcohol or heroin. There's definitely a physical component to the addiction. That if you stop cold turkey, you're going to want to start again. Because your body is going to say, wait a minute, my cells are now used to having all of this nicotine in them, or cocaine, or heroin, or alcohol, or whatever the physical substance is. And they are starving without it, so we need more. So you have to get past that point first. Now, to some extent, that part may be accomplished by willpower. Maybe. I'm being simplistic. That is, that you can just maybe lock yourself away somewhere for a week with no alcohol or nicotine or heroin, or check into a rehab facility or whatever. Just find some way to just physically isolate yourself from that thing that you are addicted to. Okay, but that's only step one. That's just getting your body to get rid of the substance in your cells that they are craving. Then comes what I would consider to be the hard part, that is stopping yourself from going back to what it is that you have now ceased to be physically addicted to, but you still want to do it. Now, and that's where the question why comes in. Question why is always an important question in my mind, but here it's like the central question. Why, when you have stopped, let's say, you've been excessively drinking for years and years and years, you've got liver damage, maybe you've got kidney damage, diabetes or whatever, and so you stop because you don't want to die, or similarly with nicotine, you're starting to get lung problems and perhaps cardiovascular problems, and you want to stop because you don't want to die. So that gives you the incentive to stop. Why do so many people still go back to it? When I was an EMT, I used to periodically have to deal with people in my town who had emphysema because they had smoked all of their lives and they were on oxygen. And I would attend them for some reason or other, that maybe they'd had some difficulty breathing or something like that. And quite often, they'd be smoking. Like they've got difficulty breathing, they're on oxygen, and they can't quit smoking. So they know why they should be smoking, should stop smoking, but they can't. So it's not just about willpower, it's about something else. Now, what's that all about? So perhaps the central point that I want to make at this stage is that willpower is not the issue. Willpower is a red herring to some extent, and it's frequently used by people saying, oh, look at him, he's fat, he doesn't have the willpower to stop eating, or look at him, he's got emphysema and he doesn't have the willpower to quit smoking, or look at him, he's ruined his life, he's crashed cars, he's lost his home because he drinks too much, or he's addicted to heroin or whatever. Okay, I want to take willpower out of the equation. It's used as a weapon against people who are addicted, and if you're not careful, you can use it against yourself. You can say, well, look, I really want to quit drinking or quit smoking, but I can't, so I guess I must be a weak person. I don't have the willpower to do it. Let's just take willpower out entirely. There is an element of willpower, obviously, in just about everything we do, but let's just take that out of the equation and ask the more basic question: why can't you quit? Or what need is that thing that you want to quit filling for you that you can't give up? That's the central question. I'm going to give you just one example at the outset, personal, smoking. When I was a teenager, I started smoking because it was cool, obviously. Your friends are doing it, and you think, yeah, that's cool, and then you keep it up. And I kept it up into my early 20s, and then I quit because the taxation system in Britain was such that every year they would add a little bit and a little bit and a little bit onto the price of cigarettes, and it got to the point where 20 cigarettes was 10 shillings, which in those days was a lot of money, certainly a lot of money for me, and I just decided, okay, that's it, I'm quitting. And I was able to quit fairly easily, and the physical addiction to nicotine didn't last very long at all, maybe 24 or 48 hours. It wasn't difficult. But then I discovered that I used smoking for all kinds of things. I used it to take a break, for example, when I needed to get away from my classes that I was teaching for a few minutes. I would go into the staff room and smoke a cigarette. And I remember very clearly, a couple of days after I'd quit smoking, I decided I needed a break from my class. I set them some work and I disappeared for a few minutes into the staff room. And I stood there and I thought, what am I going to do? And so I couldn't think of anything to do, so I went back to my class. I used to smoke a cigarette if I was waiting for a bus, just something to do with my hands. I used smoking as a kind of punctuation in my life. You know, when something ended, like a meal, I would put a full stop at the end of the meal with a cigarette. And so one of the ways that I remained off smoking was working out what need it was filling in my life, and then the next important point was to find something else to fill that void that the cigarettes had left when I quit smoking. And I was very successful back then, but I didn't smoke for most of my life. After about 25, I quit, and I didn't start smoking again until I was about 60. I don't smoke cigarettes anymore, but I started smoking cigars. And I still have a cigar now and again, once or twice a week. And it would be nice to quit. And I have no physical addiction whatsoever. If I don't smoke a cigar for a day, 2 days, 3, 4, 5 days, I don't care. I can go all that time without smoking, but then something happens and I just sit on my balcony usually and smoke a cigar, and it makes me happy to do that. But I really shouldn't be doing it, and I shouldn't want to do that. But there's some psychological component to smoking cigars that I can't quit because I can't find anything to fill the void that's missing. What would be a good thing to do when I'm, let's say halfway through revising a chapter that I'm working on, and I want to take a little break, and I decide to sit out on my balcony in the evening breeze and just light up a cigar. A bar of chocolate? Could I have a bar? I like dark chocolate. Could I have a bar of dark chocolate sitting in my refrigerator and say, okay, it's time to take a break. I'll go out on my balcony and eat a bar of dark chocolate. It's not going to work. You see, the thing is that smoking cigars is not just about the physical act of sitting and smoking a cigar. There's a whole culture that surrounds it. You can think of, for example, Winston Churchill puffing on a cigar, or Orson Welles maybe, or somebody that you can think of just sitting back, relaxing, maybe with a brandy snifter. I don't know, that's another issue entirely. But then just like puffing on the cigar, it has around it an aura, a cultural feeling, a whole worldview. And a bar of chocolate is just not going to fill that cultural void. So it's a very difficult issue. It's not just replacing one thing with another. It's finding deep down in your soul, in your psyche, whatever you want to call it, that thing, for me, that cigar, what is that satisfying in my self-image? Because when I'm sitting on my balcony and I'm puffing away, I am satisfying something in my psychological makeup that I don't know what else to replace it with. I'd be open to suggestions if I had a comment section, which I don't. But that's the struggle I have right now, is finding something that will meet the need that my psychology requires or has become habituated to. It's going to be different. It's going to be obviously a replacement, but it's not going to be something that's as harmful to my cardiovascular and pulmonary system as smoking cigars. Now, for me, one of the relatively simple solutions to this problem is to be too busy to smoke cigars. Now, I started teaching this week, and that's keeping me fairly busy. If I actually had a 9-to-5 job, as I used to have for several years, I wouldn't have the time to sit on my balcony and just feel the breezes and imagine that I'm Orson Welles or what have you. I mean, I'd have some time, but not a lot. And if my time is just taken up, then it fills that void in a very different way. It's a substitute of a different sort. So that's one solution. Another solution is to find those times in the week. Typically for me, it's a Sunday afternoon, because Sundays are habitually my day of rest. When I don't do my writing, I don't pay bills or teach or any of those kinds of things. I just sort of hang out. And I've found that one of the problems with hanging out is I'm not very good at it. I'm a really dyed-in-the-wool Calvinist Presbyterian for whom the work ethic is very strong and very powerful. So I'm very happy when I'm busy, and I'm usually busy most of the time, 6 days a week. But then on Sunday, I don't always know what to do with myself, because I'm saying, okay, well, you need to take a break. You know, don't write on your books 7 days a week. Don't make videos or do your blogs 7 days a week. Take a day off. And okay, I'll take. But then what? Well, that's how I've partly come to a solution. I go out on my bicycle and take photographs. I'm now in a new location, so I've got a lot of new places that I can go and visit, and find a pagoda or two and spend part of the day taking photographs, and then come home and process them, stick them on social media and so forth. The slight snag is that it's hot here, and I can't be out and about in the middle of the day because it's just brutal, and I'd eventually not be able to continue. And so I tend to go out early in the morning, and I'm back home in my apartment by about 11 o'clock. And when I finish processing, it's probably about 12 or 1 o'clock. Maybe cook some nice food for lunch. But then I've still got the afternoon and the evening. So I need to find the thing that I can do that will satisfy that inner urge to be different in some. It's very hard for me to explain what it is. It's a matter of relaxation in an aura of just sheer pleasure. I don't know what that is. But my main point here is, first of all, find out why you are doing the thing that you're doing that you want to give up. And there are numerous answers to that, including genetic answers, and that actually leads to a whole different set of solutions. But if they are psychological solutions or psychological problems with need for a psychological solution, you have to first go inside yourself and really examine. Some people can't do that. They have to go to a therapist. Just as they have to give up smoking, they'll go to a therapist or go to a support group. Go to somebody who can help you dig deep down below the surface, below that I do it because I like doing it. That's just trivial. What is it about that you really enjoy that makes it so difficult to give up despite the fact that it's harming you? How can you tip the balance from the harm that it's doing being the dominant feature and the pleasure it's giving you being subordinate? Because all the time that you're still doing it, then the pleasure, even though it may not look like pleasure in the conventional sense, the positive value has to somehow be reduced so that the negative value becomes higher. And that's when willpower can take over. But you've got to sort out the equation first. So, again, not really finished with the topic, but finished with it for today. I'm going to come back and talk about change at least one more time next Friday. But for now, tell your friends, like and subscribe, and I'll see you on Tuesday for a recipe which I don't know yet. I will surprise myself and surprise you on Tuesday. Bye.